Welcome. I'm Eric Holdeman, and this is Disaster Zone, a show about emergencies and disasters that can happen at anywhere and at any time. Forest fires, mudslides, or earthquakes. All disasters are multifaceted events. Understanding the complexity of disasters and what worked and what didn't is the life's work of Professor Hans Scholl, University of Washington. He joins us today to talk about disaster analysis and learned lessons that can save lives. And so welcome, Dr. Scholl, and I'm going to call you Hans for the rest of the program.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
You have a particular area of expertise in research as it relates to disasters. So what is that in general? And you know, our audience is generally citizens, so they're not emergency managers either.
Sure, sure. Well, my background, I'm at the information school at the University of Washington, and my area of expertise and research is information management, and that is a rather new slice of disaster-related research. Colleagues in sociology, geology, and other fields have done that for that long, as I mentioned it, but information management, we look at into this year for the last 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah, so that's not very long.
And let me explain what information management means. It is basically the combination, and that is also the agenda of the information school, of information as a content and a process, but also the technology side of it, and then last not least, the people and organizational side. And if you look at disaster, that brings us right into two areas. One is the most central, I believe, in disaster response, which is situational awareness and the common operating picture.
I love you. It's something I talk about all the time.
And the other is the managerial challenges that you experience in a chaotic situation.
Yes, it's a complex deal. Nothing simple when it comes to a disaster, and especially all this information management.
Exactly.
Type of thing. So, you know, what's the process you use to determine disaster readiness, and how accurate do you think your conclusions are based on your research? I mean, because that's one of the things we can come up with here's our assessment, but.
Yeah, what we try basically is with our research is to understand what's going on. We're looking for meaning. We are recommending measures, what to do in order to improve the readiness of first responders to, for example, have situational awareness sooner and have a common operating picture sooner. And everything that helps in that regard would be an improvement. That is what we are looking for. So it is not to assess the overall readiness of the whole state or FEMA Region 10 or whatever, but this particular slice, how can we help first responders wherever they are to know sooner what they're up against and how they can coordinate their responses.
Now, do you include emergency managers?
Absolutely.
You'll see in the first responder side? Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're talking...
A lot of times they just say police, fire.
No. It's basically, we are in our research, and that brings me to what do? We interview people at length. I mean, from the director of the State Emergency Management Division to those people, but basically in OSO, who were the first on the ground.
And OSO was
in 2014 the catastrophic, tragic, I should say, rather, a hill collapsing, the mudslide of proportions that we had never seen in recent years.
Oh, yeah.
And 43 people lost their lives. So that was one of the largest disasters of that kind that we have ever seen here.
Okay. And yeah, I first became aware of your work after the OSO mudslide. I had gone to several after-action meetings, and the OSO event was pretty complex because you had multiple centers trying to deal with the same event, even more so than you would expect, because the slide bifurcated the road and you had operation centers. And what I found when I read your report, I said, this guy figured it out. Because we hadn't figured, everybody I was sending, they were feeling different parts of the elephant or the camel, and then we actually rotated people, so they were feeling different parts of the animal at a different point in time.
Absolutely.
So what were your findings about the
Well,
OSO?
the interesting thing is when I told before that we were interested in situational awareness and the common operating picture. Now, when you ask people, when was your situational awareness established? Some people from the States said, oh, on the first day. The others said a few days later. The FEMA report said on day 5.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is everybody understands something different. What is such situational awareness. And what is good is there's a colleague of mine, Mika Ansley. She served as the chief scientist for the Air Force for many, many years. And she said if we look at situational awareness, we have to look at 3 things. First is perception, basic perception, what is there? Yeah. Then once you perceive all these things, after a while you comprehend what's going on. But that is not good enough because you want to go into the third area of situational awareness, which is prediction. Now you can plan. You understand this is a dynamic event. It will develop this way, and now we counter act, or we try to anticipate what is going to happen next. And that is when you go into planning. Now, the state people obviously said, okay, we now know there is a landslide. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Even though some people didn't understand until maybe Monday morning how massive a landslide it was. But you
it happened on Saturday
and you
morning.
can also see how teams were deployed. First on the Saturday was the local team on OSO and the fire in the area there, fire station 27, I guess it was. Then the Type 3 team, the regional team, came in and managed the response from Sunday to Wednesday, and on Thursday only, the Type 2, the state,
yes, they had a much
bigger guns came in, you know, and then they were in there for 2 weeks, and then another Type 2 team came in. So that also shows you that the understanding of the magnitude and the enormity of the whole thing
changed over time.
Took some time. It took basically until Tuesday, Wednesday to understand, oh, this is so big. We have to bring in the bigger guns.
Mobilize,
you know, quote unquote.
Okay. Well, we're halfway through.
Okay.
And I feel like we're just grazing the subject here, but I really appreciate your insights, and I think people are learning from that. And for you folks at home, on the second part of the show, we're going to be talking about Cascadia Rising 2016, and that was the biggest earthquake exercise. I want to say 20,000 people participate in that in Oregon, Washington, and I think maybe Alaska a little bit. So, but first we're going to take this quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about that exercise and what the good doctor found out about that through his investigation. So don't go away, and we'll be right back.
In the event of a catastrophe, you need to know what to do to make it through. By preparing now, you and your family will have a better chance of surviving when a catastrophe happens. Here are 3 tips to get you started. Have an emergency plan with meeting places and an out-of-area contact. Prepare a supply kit for your family and pets that includes what you need to survive for 7 to 10 days. And be prepared to help each other. Start now and take the first step to protect the ones you love. For more information, visit makeitthrough.org or find us on Facebook.
We're back today talking with Professor Hans Scholl from the University of Washington, and we're talking about his research into disasters, situational awareness, situational analysis. And we want to just come back and talk briefly about OSO, where we finished that first half. What were 2 or 3 findings you've found out of that?
And also a total of 119 agencies and non-governmental entities work together. So that's a huge coordination task and a huge effort. But here's one thing we have to remember. You can only coordinate on the basis of data, of information. If you don't have that information, then you cannot really effectively coordinate. Problem with all these agencies working together was that there was no integration of information sharing. There was no standard for information collection. There was no information architecture. There were very different systems being used. For example, from the incident command post every night a hard drive was carried over to the Snohomish County EOC, you know, and it shows you that the coordination and communication and transfer of information was sort of cumbersome.
In the 21st century.
Yeah, and you know, people, you have email, you have radio, you have spoken language, you have people have written down things, and nowhere there was any standardization of anything, which hampered the response and the coordination significantly. So one deficit here leads immediately to other deficits over in the managerial area.
Right. And the whole issue with, we talked about National Incident Management System, ICS, it's all about standardization and what you're trying to achieve. So,
Right.
Well, let's move on and talk about Cascadia Rising, and it's important because it shows how bad can be for a big earthquake from that standpoint, but then also it's going to be repeated in 2022. There's going to be another Cascadia Rising exercise, and it sounds like it's a long way away, but one of the things that we talked about at the break is what I've found again and again, we call them lessons learned, but generally there's lessons observed. They aren't learned. You've done several academic papers based on your research in Cascadia Rising 2016. How did you go about conducting that research? Because I said there's like 20,000 people. Military played very heavily.
Yes. And they actually didn't do a tabletop exercise, but they did what they called mission rehearsal. So they put boots on the ground and they moved stuff around. And that was insightful for them. They were actually very well prepared in helping. Now, what we found in OSO, in order of magnitude, you know, I mean, we're not talking about now 119 agencies, which is complex enough to do. Now we are talking about 23,000 participants. Against every EOC along the West Coast. I mean,
Oregon,
Washington, Idaho. At least everything west, including the I-5 corridor, was activated and played. So quite a different level of complexity here. And all these things that we already had discovered and also now played even more heavily. You know, for example, the state's system, the so-called web EOC, it's a web-based system to logistic systems to coordinate inside an emergency operations center, but also communicate with others, completely broke down. There were counties that had no access, no communication with the state at all. And you can imagine what that means for resource management. If people request resources that they don't have and there is no answer. That was the reality during the exercise. And the exercise had so many artificialities that it was found that this has to be repeated. As the state report and the FEMA report correctly state, we are not prepared at all, you know.
Especially, you know, the two parts of emergency operations centers, I always say, is they receive information, create a common operating picture, and then they do logistics.
Exactly.
So, and the logistics, I think, was one of the biggest
problems. I mean, a few things had been done. There was an attempt to, after OSO, to standardize the resource requesting procedure in the state. That is not completed yet, but it helped. However, let's face the other reality. At OSO, when the fiber connection between Arlington and Darrington was down, there was no phone connection for hours or for a day and a half or something. With Cascadia Rising, if that is the real thing, we will have no power immediately. Yeah, we will have no water within less than 24 hours. We will have no running sewage systems. We will have power lines broken. We will have fires. We have
no pumping of liquid fuels.
No pumping of anything in that regard. We will have from the 1,000, we don't know the exact number, but the Western Washington University scenario study said that we have to consider 1,000 bridges being broken down, plus railroad bridges that cross roads. That means we will end up with something like 450, maybe 500 islands where populations will be trapped. There is no in, there is no out.
Yes.
And you have no communication, it will be dark. So I don't want to do fear-mongering here, but it is a situation where we will have a massive humanitarian crisis within maybe 72 hours.
Yeah.
And so if you have no information infrastructure, and power, our systems depend on power, you know.
If you don't have electrical
very
power,
simple,
everything,
then it is almost pointless.
Yeah.
And what we also learned from Oso very impressively was the small scale thing rather than the bigger thing. So we had assets in the air right away, half an hour after it happened. So when the helicopter pilots saw that there were people still on the debris field, they began to engage in search and rescue right away, you know, forgetting that they should inform a few people on the ground what they were seeing. Right?
Yes, right.
And this comes across like a blame. It's not. I mean, this is the most natural thing.
That's right. They saved lives.
Absolutely.
Actually, they're the ones
There's
who saved
nobody
lives.
to blame. The problem for the people on the ground is they didn't understand what they were up to.
Yeah.
Both had important parts of the information needed to understand what was going on, but they didn't talk or couldn't talk to each other.
Yeah.
This will much more heavily happen in the big one.
And let me just comment. You're talking about these islands, and we'll have a humanitarian crisis. That if you don't have water stored, people start dying after 72 hours without water. And the issue I call earthquakes come as you are disasters. So you're either ready or you're not. The other thing is you don't expect to die in earthquakes. Don't be fatalist saying, well, we'll all be dead anyway. No. Only about 2% of all people die in a catastrophic earthquake. So you have to be prepared to live on an island or to get off the island somehow to get
one or the other.
Yes. I know you wrote about this a little bit. We live in a digital age. Do you think now we don't know how to operate without...
It looks like. It pretty much looks like. So for me, one of the most puzzling thing in analyzing the exercise, and I was, by the way, a participant myself. I played as a participant because I have all these FEMA courses. So in
where were you?
In the situation unit, the damage unit, actually, in the city of Seattle EOC, I played for a day, and I can tell you, it was very, very stressful. Yeah. And I saw at firsthand what is happening and how you are unable to really integrate and consolidate information and have it on time and produce a situation report. So it is really, really challenging.
I commend you for doing that because it gives you a taste.
It gives
not
me
just investigating. You're saying, well, this is hard.
I believe if you do research, you should not only know what you're talking about, looking from Cloud 27, 33,000 feet elevation, but be on the ground and understand what it's all about.
Walk a mile in their shoes. So what's the solution if you can't use digital? You need to have a backup plan.
Yeah, let me get to the digital age. So if the power is down and some exercise players actually ignored that the power was down. So they didn't play for 2 hours and they're doing nothing. And then said, okay, the power is back, now we operate like we did before. That will not be so. So we are basically back, as one respondent said, to the year 1820. That means we have flashlights, candlelights, we have messages on foot, and we have paper and tea cards and that stuff. Here's the point. Everything slows down, so the whole response slows down. You are separated. You don't know what the other party is doing. It's a fiction to believe that there is some central point where you have a common operating picture that is anywhere close to what it is, or it should be, at least in the first maybe week, maybe 2 weeks. So now you can bring power back, generator power. You can have mobile cell phones. So you bring back facets of the infrastructure. You have ham radio where you can transfer very slowly some data. But and they also need power, you know. So you are not just on paper, but ever so slowly, technology comes back into play. You have to have a plan for how you scale that. Scaling down from, here you are cut off, now you're on paper, but now it's coming back ever so slightly. You have to plan for that and exercise that. The most important thing is to exercise that. Yeah, people are no longer used to do handwritten notes, and we have to have standardization for that as well. Yeah? And what I envision, and that is one of my recommendations, is to, east from the Cascades, we have all the power most probably, and we will have air assets that we can bring in out. So we could basically take all the manual things, take pictures, take it over where we have data centers, key it in, and so we can bring in even laptops with information the next day, so they can work in some limitations on that.
Actually, establish the workarounds. Actually, it's done a lot for Y2K. Way back when they said, okay, if the primary fails, what is our background? For 911 centers, they used to do a hand card, and so they practiced doing the hand card, passing it from the call taker.
And we have to do that again. We have to do that again massively. I have also, we have to also consider other things, and that is, according to all the simulations, we know that most of the fire stations, most of the police stations, the closer you come to the coast, will be completely destroyed. So they are not operational. That will also hold true for EOCs. So how do you bring those responders, those people who work in the EOC, plus those from the agencies, they go to do the coordination work in the EOC, how do you bring them there? And what do you do if the EOC itself, of course, for example, the city of Seattle will go to the University of Washington if that EOC is still...
That's the backup.
Is the backup. But that can also be down. You have to...
And you have to get across the big bridge to get there.
That's we have the tunnel now from the link, but still. I always wonder why we are not beginning to think a little bit outside the box. And that may be a wild idea, but I wrote it down in the paper and got some comments on that. So if you go across the Sound, in Bremerton, we have some decommissioned carriers. This would be the ideal thing if retrofitted. We could have several EOCs there and fly people in there for doing their work for a shift, and then fly them back. And we have all the infrastructure there. I'm just saying that to look into potential solutions to this problem.
I would say think outside the box.
Yeah, outside the box. It's an example.
Okay. Well, listen. We violated an Eric Holdeman rule. We've already gone over.
Oh, my God.
But I think this information is so critically important to know that the research you're doing, this message, I actually blog on this show when I'm done, and goes out to emergency managers across the United States, that hopefully someone will hear a piece of this, like thinking outside the box. Forget the digital age. How do we go back to General Grant handing a note to a corporal to send a message type of thing. So thank you for being part of this whole process, and I hope you keep doing what you are doing for our broader community.
Thank you, Eric.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
You get this lovely disaster zone. Here we go. I've never done that either, mug.
Okay.
And may all our disasters not come immediately, because there's a lot of work to be done.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the show. And this brings us to the end of our show for today. Thanks for tuning in and learning more about what you and others can do to become better prepared for disasters. Remember, if you're going to get prepared, and we don't know when the next earthquake or other disaster is coming, today is a good day to start. Have a great day and tune in again soon.